Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday, and the patch notes for patch 7.19 have just been posted, and that means it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes of patch 7.19 and letting you guys know what you can look forward to in the coming weeks. 7.19 has a lot of really big changes in it because it's the first post-Worlds patch, so none of this is going to affect professional play, so Riot can afford to do a lot of the things that they've been thinking about doing for a long time. So this is probably going to be a long one. There are a lot of big champion changes for me to talk about, so settle in, and if you want, you can skip the video entirely and just read the patch notes. That might be the easier way to do it. Anyways, moving on. First up, let's talk about Azir. He's getting reworked in this patch. Beforehand, he just didn't have enough counterplay. He was supposed to be this big, long-range artillery mage dude. The biggest problem with him, though, is that once you closed on him, he had a way of just saying no and bopping you away or using his mobility to escape. And so there wasn't enough counterplay to a very well-played Azir. So this rework is intended to sharpen his strengths as sort of the sustained damage mobile carry champion in the mid lane, but also increase his weaknesses by forcing him to get closer to the action as opposed to sitting from a million yards away and killing you. So he's generally tankier now. I think he gained some bonuses to his base health and his health growth. His range on his Q and W were reduced, and his soldier stab damage was reduced against secondary targets. However, he does gain bonus attack speed when 3 or more soldiers are out for a few seconds. I believe it's up to 60% attack speed, which is quite a bit at max rank. E also grants a shield immediately when he dashes, and if he hits a champion, he readies a new charge of W instantly, so we can get those 3 soldiers out. And then his R no longer prevents enemy dashes once the wall is done moving, but it will still block them if he casts it while they're in flight. So LeBlanc dashes at you and you cast R, it'll knock her back, but LeBlanc can then dash back over the wall once it's done moving. So Azir should be much lower range, much more risky, but also has the potential for a higher damage output if played well. I'm looking forward to playing these changes as I do enjoy playing Azir a lot, so we'll see how it does shape up. The next big rework is the Xin Zhao rework. He's a really binary duelist with very little counterplay and nothing he really excels at. I've talked about this a little bit in my previous Xin Zhao video a couple of weeks ago, but this rework is finally coming out, and it's intended to give him better skill expression and also a stronger niche. He's supposed to be now this mid-team fight duelist. In the middle of a team fight, he's supposed to duel somebody, and he primarily accomplishes this through his new R. It still knocks away everybody except the last champion attacked, but now it also creates this zone around Xin Zhao that prevents him from being damaged by anybody who's outside of it. So the Jinx ult will explode harmlessly on Xin Zhao unless she's standing in the zone, at which point it will still do full damage. So this allows Xin Zhao to knock away everybody and then have plenty of alone time with his chosen target. He can still be crowd controlled though. Xin Zhao also has a brand new passive. It now grants him his old W's heal and bonus damage on every third auto attack. His new W is a stab thrust ability akin to Rengar's Q or Sejuani's W. It damages all enemies hit by both parts and will also slow enemies hit by the thrust. His E now grants the old W attack speed bonus after he dashes, but does have a reduced slow, and that's to compensate for the fact that he has 2 slows on his kit now with the W. And the R we already covered. So Xin Zhao should have a much better niche now as sort of this guy who wants to single out people in the middle of a team fight. So I'm interested to see how it works. I'm not quite sure if this is going to make Xin Zhao better or worse, but I do think it's a better direction for the champion. Finally, moving on to buffs and nerfs. Aatrox is getting buffed in this patch very minorly. He's a little weak in team fights because he just doesn't have good target prioritization. Divers should have really good target access, and Aatrox just doesn't really have that at the moment because of how easily Q is interrupted. So his Q is now unstoppable on the descent, and he gets a little bit more attack range out of his R while that's active. I believe it's up to 225 from 175, so Aatrox will have a little bit easier time actually getting to people and then hitting them. Caitlyn is getting a fairly large adjustment. I hesitate to call it a rework, but it is slightly a bit of a rework. And this is because post-nerf Caitlyn was basically unplayable. She just didn't have a niche because her early game was so bad, her attacks felt awful, etc., etc. So Riot are giving her back some of her old nerfs. I believe she's getting some of her attack speed gains back, and the fall-off damage on her Q is retuned back to where it was before. But now she has a better niche as sort of this late game good well scaling champion while not being quite as effective in the early game. She did have reduced health and health regen growth stats, so she'll be a little bit more vulnerable to all-ins if you are able to get to her. She also has her W trap duration was reduced, and the headshot damage was up. And finally, her passive now works on turret, so she should be considerably weaker here in the early game, but also much stronger in the late game. Janna is also receiving one of these mini rework adjustment kind of deals. I'm not quite sure what to call it, but it's something along those lines. Because she just had too low counterplay. She's basically a shield bot down in the bottom lane. She just exists to press E on the AD carry. And so Riot want to give her more tools to incentivize riskier playing. Now, this is intended as a net nerf to Janna, so if she does feel weaker, that is intended, but the idea being that if you can figure out her new skill set, she should still be a fairly strong champion in the right hands. Her attack range has been increased by a little bit, and her passive now grants Janna the bonus movement speed from it, and it also causes her auto attacks and her W to deal bonus magic damage based on her bonus movement speed. Along the same lines, W's bonus movement speed was slightly decreased, and his cooldown and slow duration were also decreased as well. So she can cast more W's, it doesn't slow for as much, but because it gives her bonus movement speed, she may want to hang on to it for the bonus damage that her auto attacks will get now. Her Q's mana cost and cooldown are both decreased, and the range of the quick cast on the Q has been increased as well. So Janna can quick tap Q for a full 1,000 units as opposed to the around 750, 780 units it was before. And finally, her E's cooldown was increased by 8 seconds at rank 1, though it does decrease back down to the normal cooldown, the current cooldown, by the time it hits rank 5. So Janna will have to make use of her new offensive tools to be successful in lane. She can't just sit there and EU every single time you go for a trade. Malphite is getting some minor buffs in this patch. He's not really holding up his end of the deal as an anti-physical tank, so Riot are giving him better tools to sharpen that identity. So he is getting triple the passive armor from his W, while his passive is up. So as long as he's got Granite Shield there, he gets triple the amount of armor he should have from his W. And his W now grants percent armor as well. It's, I believe, up to 30% of his armor as opposed to just a flat amount. So Malphite will be very good if he can stack armor, and will be very strong if he can start a fight with Granite Shield available. Ornn is getting a couple of buffs as well in this patch. He's still too weak. I talked about this a little bit in a podcast recently. So he's getting some minor buffs to help him with his laning phase. His base mana was incredibly low, and his mana costs were incredibly high due to the fact that he can buy in lane. It's a little overpowered, or it's a little too good on him. So what they're doing is they're giving him more base mana, and his Q's mana cost was normalized, and his E's mana cost was just flat out reduced. So Ornn should have a few more spellcasts in lane, shouldn't have to be as judicious while using his mana. Vayne is also receiving a small adjustment akin to the Caitlyn and Janna reworks. Right now, she's too strong at squishy bursting, but she's not good enough at tank busting, and she's not really rewarding enough for her weak laning phase. People can shut her down very easily, and then she just doesn't do enough once she actually does hit the late game. So she's getting some slight buffs to help her out, and also reducing her effectiveness at straight up killing squishies. Her Q's bonus damage can no longer crit, but the scaling is up, so she won't Q you for half your health with Static Shiv anymore. That's a good thing. W's percent health scaling is now down at earlier levels, but the minimum damage is up, so she'll be doing a little bit more guaranteed true damage when proccing W. And then every no, hold on, that's a different champion I'm reading the crib notes for. And then her R's duration has been increased, or will be increased by 4 seconds every time she scores a takedown while it's active. Now, she can't get more than an 8-second timer on her ultimate, so she can't stack it up to 12 or 16 seconds or something crazy like that if she gets a kill very early on in the fight. But it does mean that if she can have an immediate impact at the beginning of a fight, she can stay in final hour for a lot longer. That's going to be pretty strong. I feel like Vayne will be a much better pick now, and I think that especially if you have tanks, she's a better pick against them. Finally, for champions, we have Veigar. He's getting a few buffs along the same lines as Vayne. He's just not holding up his end of the deal in the late game. It's because of how unreliable Dark Matter is. He just can't land the ability most of the time, and it means that he doesn't do that much damage, even though he has godly amounts of AP. So Riot are giving him a little bit better of a time in actually getting some Dark Matter hits in team fights. He got a slight increase to his attack range and a slight increase to his base health regen and health growth stats, so he should be a little bit better in lane, a little bit harder to bully. And then his W's cooldown was decreased to 8 seconds, and every 50 passive stacks he gets reduce its cooldown by 10%. So as long as Veigar is getting stacks, his W's will get a lower and lower and lower cooldown until eventually Veigar can cast it all the time in late game team fights. Finally, we're going to items. Ardent Sensor is being nerfed. Riot have basically admitted that the problem with its design is that it reduces enchanters and healers to just being heal or shield bots, and it allows AD carries to forego lifesteal itemization at all. They can afford to go the double zeal item Infinity Edge build because why do you need lifesteal? You have an Ardent Sensor that heals you for a ton, and it doesn't really fit the niche it was supposed to have as an aggressive enchanter item. They don't do anything aggressive, they just press E or press W on the AD carry and let them kill everybody. So it's being retuned to be more of an aggressive enchanter pick for both players, and also forcing AD carries to build lifesteal if they want lifesteal. So it no longer gives you any on-hit heals, but the attack speed and the on-hit damage have been retuned to their values before the nerf in the previous patch. Additionally, the person who applies the buff will now get the buff as well. So if you're somebody like, let's say, Janna, and you apply Ardent Sensor, you get that attack speed buff as well and the on-hit damage. So it should be much stronger for these champions when you go for 2v2 trades. And last thing for this patch notes rundown is Bramble Vest is being nerfed. It was intended to be a very niche defensive item, but it's basically being bought regularly against literally anybody who wants to auto-attack. And that's not a good thing, because when a niche item is being built by literally everybody in every lane matchup, that's a problem. So it's being retuned, so it's not going to be quite as effective, but it will still be a good item if you want to have defense against somebody with a lot of healing or who auto-attacks a lot. So someone like Fiora as opposed to someone like Shen. So the combined cost has been increased, and the damage reflection was nerfed by 5 points, I believe. So it should be a much more focused item and better against these kind of sustained champions, and not so good against literally everybody. Anyways, that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Go ahead and let me know which changes you think are going to be the most impactful in patch 7.9. 7.19, sorry, down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. If you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.